Hello, my name is Very Tired, and welcome to my not exactly a proper YouTube channel. Today, just now, I was watching Kyle Hill's video, This Is Not a Tesseract, where he shows that funny object that has like a cube inside a cube connected to each other, that you often see on the internet in those funny morphing images of a Tesseract, and he says that's not actually what it looks like, it's actually a shadow of a four-dimensional object, and I disagree. I'm going to explain to you at least what it would look like in our dimension in hopefully a way that makes sense. But he didn't even consider the effect of a four-dimensional light source. He's thinking about how a four-dimensional object might look like in three-dimensional space, but what is it hitting to look like that cube? And it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the way I used to okay, this is probably one of the more schizoid personality disorder things where I would sit for very long periods of time just thinking about random stuff, and higher dimensions is something I got into at some point, probably back when I was doing uni and was in one of those higher level maths classes and didn't really give a shit about the maths, but I did give a shit about the weird things where you have, so background, you should probably watch Kyle Hill's video, but basically, you have your first dimension, the second dimension is at 90 degrees to that. Maybe I should do it 90 degrees, I can't even. And then the third dimension is at 90 degrees to both of them at the same time, which I do not have enough fingers, and I haven't even set up my camera to show it properly. Anyway, you know what a three-dimensional object is, but basically, mathematically, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. So the fourth dimension, we're not talking about time. That's a sort of different dimension thing. We're talking about what's at 90 degrees to all three of those dimensions at the same time. And never mind that. That stuff's too hard. Let's think about, here is my two-dimensional world, and what happens when a three-dimensional object, yes, more mecha stuff, freebies, what happens when a three-dimensional object passes through the two-dimensional plane? Because we want to know what that tesseract looks like in our three-dimensional space. Well, the whole thing can't exist in our three-dimensional slice of four-dimensional space, right? In the same way that this three-dimensional object cannot completely exist in this two-dimensional plane, right? So you have your little two-dimensional person who exists there, and I may have to just adjust my camera so that we can actually see what's going on. Okay, I will just be dark for a bit, that's fine. It wants me to update, and I am not going to do it. Right, so this is our little two-dimensional friend existing in two-dimensional space. Now keep in mind, they don't have a two-dimensional retina like we do. To be able to see a three-dimensional object, we have a two-dimensional retina that sort of extrapolates based on that. He's only got a one-dimensional retina, so when he sees a line, he doesn't see that it's a line, he just sees a wall in front of him, right? But he can go around that wall. Yeah. But it doesn't look he can't hop over it the way that we can hop over it. He could go up to it, but then would have to go around it. Okay, got that idea right? What happens if this object passes through here? What does he see? He sees that wall, right? But when he tries to go around, he sees, oh, it's a square. And it's the same thing if he had a square in his two-dimensional space, he would see a wall, and he would be able to go around it and see that it's a square. It's a badly drawn square, but let's call it a square. So you have this, you plonk it on that, all he can see at the moment is the square. He can't see anything above that, he can only see the square. And so when this passes through, which I can't do because my piece of paper is not permeable, but if this passes through that two-dimensional plane, that square stays a square, it suddenly appears out of nowhere, it stays a square, and it suddenly disappears as it passes through the plane, right? So, if we have a tesseract passing through our slice of three-dimensional space, you think about this, okay, what is three-dimensional space? This is our 2D plane. Our three-dimensional space has lots of 2D planes through it, right? So if you think about our three-dimensional space, it's just one slice of a four-dimensional space. You get a tesseract passing through it. It would be this suddenly appears in space, and suddenly disappears. But that case only applies if it hits at a perfectly straight angle. What if it hits like this? What if it hits like that, right? And can you see what this little three-dimensional dude, he sees a point appear out of nowhere. And then the object, as it passes through that plane, it's really hard to show it properly. You can play with this on your own, but it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then get smaller and smaller, and then disappear into a point again. But it really depends on what the angle is that it hits at. Like, if it hits with this flat edge, instead of a point, he'll see a line. Like, you know, if I hit it in the same way that this is, like that way, he'll see a line appear, and then see, like, what, a rectangle. If he walked around it, he would see the rectangle get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then maybe, I mean, this isn't a perfect cube, but maybe at some point he would see the perfect square, and then it would turn into a rectangle again, and then turn into a line and disappear. If you hit like this, if it was perfectly on, you think about the cross-section here, it would be a triangle. You would see point, triangle, at some point it would turn into a square, then triangle again, and then point again and disappear. But if you're at like a not perfect angle, you would see maybe, like, instead of an equilateral triangle, you would see it become a different sort of a triangle, maybe an isosceles triangle, and then at some point, like, you know, instead of a square, it might be some kind of weird rectangle. At some point, it might become a square. I don't know. I can't be bothered to work out the cross-section. Someone can do modeling on this. But then it would go back to that sort of funny triangle and eventually be a point and disappear. So if a tesseract appeared in our three-dimensional space at an angle, and let me just, hello, hi again. Maybe that's better. If a tesseract appeared at an angle in our slice of three-dimensional space, then instead of just appearing as a cube and then disappearing in the same way that this appears as a square and then disappears, it would appear as a point, and then it would grow, not necessarily into the shape of a cube. I haven't worked this out, like it might be a pyramid shape or some other kind of flat-sided shape, because this at no point becomes curvy going through two-dimensional space. So it would be a flat-sided shape of some sort, and it would morph into something, maybe eventually become a cube, depending on the angle, and then it could even be like different size cubes. If you ever get a shape that is, you know, squarish, or it might be a sort of irregular cube, not really a cube. What would you call it? A rectangular prism. Here's me trying to remember childhood maths. Yeah, childhood geometry. But then it would go back to, I don't know, maybe being that pyramid again, turn into a point and then disappear. And that's what a tesseract would look like in our three-dimensional slice of space if you're extrapolating from this. You can do a similar thing with, like, if you have a one-dimensional creature who's only got a point. So, like, if this one-dimensional creature, oh my god, how do I even... You're one-dimensional dude. And if you draw a line here, that's a very terrible line you can't even see. If you draw a line there, right, your one-dimensional dude doesn't have space for a retina, but it tries to move along the single axis that it has. It comes up to here, it bumps into the line, it can't go any further, and it's like, well, shit, and has to go back. It doesn't know how long this line is. If you bring in a two-dimensional sort of square thing, and that didn't even leave a mark, right? A two-dimensional square thing, same thing. This guy would just see a brick wall, not be able to get past this square thing, have to leave, wouldn't even know that it's a square. And if you put a three-dimensional object, same thing, all it sees is a brick wall. And then you could imagine if a five-dimensional object entered into our space, would we see a brick wall? But I'm not sure that it would go that way, and that's where my brain starts to explode, is thinking about five-dimensional objects in three-dimensional space, because I can't imagine a four-dimensional object in 2D space, and I feel like this comparison to a one-dimensional thing is a little bit too limited to really be able to conceptualize or have a decent comparison. But five-dimensional objects, what would you call it? Like a hypercube or something? No, is hypercube still only 4-dimensional? I don't know, there's different names for higher dimensional. There's also like with spheres, right? I do not have a sphere to be able to show you, but like if you put a sphere through here, like I can draw a circle for our little 2-dimensional person, right? I can draw a circle for them. And they can go up, they can see, like, you know, depending on how light works in a 2-dimensional space, they might even be able to see with their 1-dimensional retina. I don't know. They might be able to see that that circle has curves. At any rate, they would be able to go around it. Now, if you get a sphere that goes through that plane, because unlike this, the sphere is the same all the way around, what they would see is a small, like they would see a point, then they would see a small circle, and it would become a big circle, and then it would become a small circle, and then it would be a point and then disappear again. And so if you had a 4-dimensional sphere equivalent passing through our 3-dimensional slice of 4-dimensional space, you would see a small little thing appear, and then it would become bigger, a round sphere thing, and then it would shrink again and disappear. And that's what I think a 4-dimensional, like that's how I think 4-dimensional objects work in 3-dimensional space, and why I don't really think a fourth dimension exists in that sense. I know string theory talks about it, but string theory sounds like a bunch of bullshit that they can't prove. It's only on maths. Same with all this stuff. This is just maths. This is nothing we can use in our lives. Yeah, so if you think about like this, these are regular shapes. It's easier to imagine. If you have like, what's that funny? No, we'll get this because I can bend it, right? Okay, imagine this 3D object passes through your 2-dimensional space, and this is where things get fun. You plonk that on there. Oh my gosh, 2 things touch at the same time. So our little 2-dimensional person in 2-dimensional space sees 2 separate objects but doesn't realize they're connected until this passes through at a point where the 2 apparent objects in that space eventually come together, and then the person who is a 2-dimensional person would realize it's connected and it's actually a 3-dimensional object. So if you ever see 2 seemingly unrelated objects like gradually merge, it might be a 4th-dimensional object passing through the 3-dimensional space in front of you. Maybe. Yeah, and then if you can imagine, here's my hand passing through 2-dimensional space. Oh, now we've got 5 things. 5 things seeming to appear in 2-dimensional space, but as my hand goes through that piece of paper, oh my god, they're all connected. Does that make sense, or do I just sound like a crazy person? I know that I am a crazy person, and that's fair. But this is just like something I spent ages thinking about when I was younger. I don't know, it might have been like late high school or early leaving into the adult world that I have utterly failed at. But that's what I think 4-dimensional objects look like in 3-dimensional space, and it has nothing to do with these rotating models that you see online. Like, that's how they try to imagine the, you know, you've got the 90 degrees to every other direction. They try and imagine it by connecting those cubes and all that, but in 3-dimensional space it doesn't work, and I don't even think it's a shadow. Like, a shadow, it depends on where the light source is coming from, right? And I can't even get a decent angle on that. You know, it looks kind of blurry and whatever, but that's 3D light onto a 2D thing, and I don't know. I think light source, if we don't know what a 4-dimensional light source is like and where it's coming from, like, you know, I guess maybe if light just appeared without any clear source, maybe it would be 4-dimensional, maybe it would be some kind of god or angel or whatever you believe in, or maybe you're just going insane in a different way to how I'm insane. Yeah, that's what I think. So, and here's me just freaking out because people are home and walking around, and I've just been on a crazy rant. Yeah, no, I don't think that 4 dimensions in that sort of 4 spatial dimensions as opposed to time as a 4th dimension, I don't think 4 spatial dimensions actually exist, because we don't see any evidence of things just, I mean, I know at a quantum level you see things pop in and out of existence, apparently. I'm not a physicist, so I don't know exactly how that works, but you know, things are constantly appearing and disappearing. You've got antimatter and matter, and then they kill each other again. But we don't see like these big blob objects come into our 3D space and then disappear, and we don't see random light sources and those kinds of things. Things seem to operate as if it's only a three-dimensional existence. And hello, I'm filming.
Okay.
Hey, give me. I'm done though. Give me like 10 seconds.
We're on our way out. Okay.
Okay. Bye. Bye.